Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Billy Riggs, and welcome to the 2024 Autonomous Vehicles in the City Symposium. We are so happy to be back here in person at the Commonwealth Club. The last time we were here was 2022 in the fall. And if you recall, those of you that do follow what we do, we have a lot of people following us online, watching us today on a live stream. We'll get comments from them. And we're going to see probably some other people rolling in. I think we've got about 150 people signed up for today in person. And a lot of what we do with autonomous vehicles in the city is try to spur a dialogue about how we can innovate cities, but also do so in a way that aligns with the values of sustainability and social justice. And that's very synonymous with the University of San Francisco's mission, but also I think what we've seen over the last 8 years that we've been hosting this conference is that it's not only aligned with our partner, we have an amazing partner with the Commonwealth Club, but actually we have a lot of cities and companies that you will see from today that are also interested in helping us figure out the wicked problems of cities. And I'm going to introduce my dean in a second, and she is a woman that's incredibly committed to helping us solve these wicked problems, and doing so in a way that brings people from the public sector, the private sector, and philanthropy together to tackle the issues of today and tomorrow. Without further ado, I want to introduce our day, and then I'm going to introduce Dean Atko Ehremjans, who's going to provide a little introduction of our opening keynote speaker. But let me just give you a flavor for what we're going to have today. We're going to have a day that was designed to have you interact with each other. We've got a generous break in the center of our day around 2 o'clock, where I'm going to hand the reins over to Dr. Henriette Cornet, who's helping me lead this effort this year, and I really am grateful for her effort. And she's going to take us through a really interesting presentation that brings in a lot of international perspectives, and then through a series of panels in the afternoon that question what is the future of public transit and automation? And then we'll close out. We have an amazing fireside chat planned with Ron Daniel from Zoox. And so I think it's a great outlay. But before we do that, we're going to have kind of a really granular discussion about curbs, about curb management, about the future of how we manage our roadways. And given that I get to wear a hat from the School of Management, a hat from public administration, but also one from engineering in my role at University of San Francisco, I think it's a really important dialogue that we're going to see continue to evolve over the coming years. So, a couple housekeeping measures. For those of you not online and here in person, restrooms are in the back. We will take a break, and we'll have coffee available during that break. Also, you have comment cards, and so while this is a very digitally enabled event, we encourage you to write down any questions you might have. I'll be here on the right-hand side of the stage during our panels, as will Dr. Cornet, and we will be able to enter those into the discussion for our panelists and for our fireside chat. So without further ado, Dr. Atko Ehremjans.
Welcome to the 8th Annual Autonomous Vehicles in the City Symposium. This is an important event as it aligns public and private interests alongside the commitment to sustainability and social action at the core of USF mission. On that note, I'm thrilled to introduce Sharon Giovinazzo. Sharon has served as the CEO of Lighthouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired in San Francisco since October 2022. She has more than 2 decades of leadership advocating for and serving the blind and low vision community. As president and CEO of the World Services for the Blind, and in various roles for the Raleigh Lines Clinic for the Blind. During her time at National Industries for the Blind, Sharon led the cultivation and understanding within Congress, federal agencies, and other organizations of the Ability One program, which leverages federal purchasing power to support community-based nonprofit agencies. Lighthouse in San Francisco included, and these agencies that are dedicated to training and employing individuals who are blind or have significant disabilities. She is passionate about the transformative potential of autonomous vehicle technology, and we thought her perspective would provide a perfect guide as we explore how AVs are changing the landscape of our cities. Please give a warm welcome to Sharon Giovinazzo.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to start off with a little story. After losing my vision 24 years ago at the age of 31, I felt like life was over. One of the hardest things was giving up driving and the independence that it afforded me. Since then, I've encountered many instances where I've been left stranded at the curbside by ride-share drivers and taxi drivers because I choose to navigate the world with a guide dog. And isn't he cute? In fact, at the Orlando airport on Sunday, an employee and I was grabbing a taxi to go to our hotel, and the taxi driver stated, "You can't bring that dog with you." And at 11:30 on Wednesday night at the Oakland airport, 4 Lyft drivers canceled on me. That was just this week. This becomes exhausting, and it's so discouraging. There's been occasions when drivers have literally callously driven off with the door open and 1 foot inside of it because they're like, "You're not going to bring the dog with you." These incidents have been entirely absent when I've used an autonomous vehicle. The vehicles provide me a level of dignity and equity that I so appreciate. The AV simply approaches, it pulls up to the curb, I open the door, and it greets me. "Hello, Sharon." I don't have to be concerned about discrimination, and I don't have to be anxious about the human interaction, making it a dangerous or difficult situation. Plus, I love the ability that I can customize my music selections. Everything from K-pop to hip-hop to country, you name it. It really underscores the true autonomy and convenience provided by this technology. Traversing the city streets of San Francisco in an AV has been an amazing experience for me over the last 19 months. From navigating the various challenges of the urban terrain to encountering pedestrians, each journey has provided invaluable insights to the capabilities of this technology. Now, media often will highlight the isolated incidents of technical glitches, but it's important to recognize the countless occasions where AVs successfully reduce potential risks in human error. During a recent trip with a companion from Arkansas, we had a green light and we were entering the crosswalk at 4th and Market when we encountered a distracted pedestrian. Guess what? They were on their phone and they stepped into the crosswalk. The AV promptly halted, demonstrating the ability to respond effectively to unpredictable human behavior. AVs have tremendous potential to enhance road safety with their 360 view and provide a seamless transportation experience. I'm grateful to the University of San Francisco and the Commonwealth Club for inviting me to address this esteemed group today. This gathering represents a convergence of a lost place, a convergence of visionary minds dedicated to shaping the future of urban mobility. As we convene to explore the transformative potential that AV technology has, let us delve deeper into the profound implications in accessibility, innovation, and infrastructure. As we envision the future of transportation, it is imperative that we consider the principles of accessibility, universal design as foundational pillars. For far too long, individuals with disabilities have faced significant barriers to mobility, constraining their independence and opportunities to fully participate in society. Yet, autonomous vehicles provide a beacon of hope, a technological advancement, if you will, with the potential to dismantle these barriers and foster a more inclusive society. In the pursuit of this objective, it is crucial that we acknowledge a symbiotic relationship between cities and AV companies. While regulations, of course, play a vital role in ensuring safety and accountability, excessive bureaucracy will only stifle innovation and hinder progress. Therefore, we must advocate for a collaborative approach, one where cities and AV companies work hand in hand to develop solutions that prioritize accessibility, fostering innovation. People in my community, in the blind and low vision community, sometimes have concerns about AVs that don't always drop off at the curb. But it's important to note that traditional rideshare and taxi services, they face similar challenges, and so do you if you go to drop off a loved one at the curb, because there's limited availability of pull-offs or dedicated curb access for quick stops. However, one notable advantage of AVs is their integrated functionality when you open your phone. It provides the users with comprehensive step-by-step walking instructions from their drop-off to where they're going, because their app is accessible. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely, especially through collaborative efforts between cities and AV developers to address parking enforcement and establish dedicated pickup and drop-off zones, therefore optimizing accessibility and convenience for everybody. By regulating curb access and designating pickup and drop-off zones, cities can enhance safety and convenience for both disabled and non-disabled individuals. All rideshare drivers, taxi drivers, and everybody, just drivers in general. By ensuring equity for disabled passengers through subsidies and targeted services, city governments can greatly reduce the transportation disparities that have long plagued our society. As we embark on this journey toward a more inclusive future, it is essential that we do not lose sight of the broader consequence of these efforts. The aftermath of the global pandemic has underscored the critical importance of accessible transportation, particularly for marginalized communities. As transit agencies grapple with budgetary constraints and service cutbacks, we just heard it on the news today about BART, the need for more innovative solutions have never been more apparent. For individuals with disabilities, seniors, and marginalized communities, AVs represent more than just a means of getting from point A to point B. They embody the promise of freedom and independence. According to the US Census Bureau, approximately 20% of Americans aged 18 and over do not have a driver's license. Individuals with disabilities face significant challenges when accessing public transportation. And this only adds to issues of isolation, limited mobility, and high unemployment rates. In the United States, approximately 1 in every 5 people, or more than 57 million people, have a disability. In the most recent government transportation survey, it indicated that 6 million individuals with a disability have difficulty accessing the transportation that they need. Transportation is a key to community-based supports that allow individuals to fulfill their civic responsibilities and make it possible for everyone to enjoy their civil rights. When a disability limits transportation options, it can result in reduced economic opportunities, isolation that exacerbates medical conditions and leads to depression, as well as a diminished quality of life, and greatly reduced quality-adjusted life years. Mitigating transportation-related obstacles for individuals with disabilities could enable new employment opportunities for more than 2 million individuals with a disability and potentially save $19 billion annually in healthcare expenditures from missed medical appointments, not to mention the quality of life when one has access to the proper medical care. With the broader impacts AVs offer, there could be a minimum of an additional $1.3 trillion in savings from productivity gains, fuel cost, and reduced accidents. In this context, autonomous vehicles offer a ray of hope, a transformative technology capable of revolutionizing mobility for individuals, seniors, and underserved communities. By leveraging the power of data and technology, AVs can enhance the efficiency and accessibility of public transit systems, thereby extending mobility to those who need it most. As we embrace the promise of AV technology, we must remain vigilant that our commitment to inclusivity and equity. Across the country, discussions surrounding autonomous vehicle legislation often overlook the needs of individuals with disabilities. AV companies have invited all segments of the population to the table, and they have amplified the voices of the disability community and fostered collaboration between all stakeholders, allowing AV technology to serve as a force for positive social change. In closing, I want to implore you to transcend your individual perspectives and hold inclusivity and accessibility at the heart of how you examine how AVs fit into the landscape of our cities. During this afternoon's discussions, I urge you to approach each dialogue through the lens of inclusivity. That way, we can cultivate a culture of empathy, understanding, and collaboration. We can embrace the ethos of yes and, recognizing that each contribution, no matter how divergent, has the potential to enrich our collective understanding and propel us closer to a shared goal, an inclusive and accessible future which all voices are heard, valued, and respected. I'm committed to exploring this issue on behalf of my 31-year-old self, who suddenly lost a measure of independence and freedom because I lost my vision. On her behalf, I'm here to consider the ways so many underserved communities can experience the freedom to move about this beautiful city and so many other beautiful cities safely and with convenience. At 31, I could not imagine how this technology could enhance my life. 24 years later, I cannot imagine my life without it. Thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Billy Riggs. Come on, let's go. I think my dog wants to talk.
Oh my gosh,
Thanks, sir.
it was phenomenal.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. It was incredible, and inspiring. Sharon, stick around. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people in the audience who want to talk to you later. Those of you in the back, if you want to find a seats, it says reserved up front, but they're for you. We want to make a home for everybody. It is an inclusive space. A reminder, we have comment cards. Right now, I want to tear off this. I'm going to invite our next panelists up here, Molly Cohen-D'Agostino and Ariel Fleischer. And I really want to, I think that was a really good place to start. We had a number of conversations last fall with May Mobility, with Ann Foss from City of Arlington, and I think a lot of the issues that we talked about there were embedded in Sharon's talk, but we're going to get granular now and talk about some of what she described with regard to how we manage streets and curbs. And so when we talked before, we thought it would be good to start off with some hot takes because we've been thinking about this spicy new technology. So maybe, Molly, we could just start off with some hot takes, and you could give us your hot take.
Okay, so we were initially thinking of this as myths, but we wanted it to be hot takes so we could keep it positive. Excuse me.
Sorry.
I'll introduce myself.
What a horrible host I am.
No.
Maybe you all could just tell each other who you are.
Okay, sure. So, hi, I'm Molly D'Agostino. I have a public policy background, and now I lead a new center at UC Davis called the Mobility Science, Automation, and Inclusion Center. I also facilitate public policy outreach and engagement for our state-funded research portfolio, where I focus on emerging tech, public transit, and shared mobility. So I'll just pause there and let you introduce, and then maybe we'll come back to our hot takes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ariel. I serve as Waymo's Policy Development and Research Manager. So Waymo, which I'm assuming everyone is familiar with, is an autonomous vehicle technology company. We're operating here in San Francisco, as well as LA, Phoenix, and Austin. In my role at Waymo, I help Waymo develop policy positions on the issues that matter to key stakeholders, so whether that's transit integration or equity, data sharing, curb access, all of those things are in my portfolio as part of our city policy team. I'm very excited to be here today for this conversation.
And I'm Billy Riggs, and I get to maybe have a hot take too. But Ma, let's hear yours to start off with.
Okay, so one of my hot takes is that complete streets, this concept of complete streets, and this idea of connectivity and connected infrastructure have been quite separate, but I think in the future they're going to converge. So you will see more connectivity in our conversations about complete streets.
I was going to say I want to double click on that, but I hate that phrase. But I do want to learn more about that. So my hot take in the spirit of the curb. So Molly, Billy, and I are working on some research together, and we'll talk more about that. And we spend our Tuesday afternoons pontificating about the curb. So this is like heaven for us. But throughout all of our conversations, which span, data and all these things, I think when it comes down to it, you're reallocating something. This is not a data conversation. This is really a conversation in many ways about political will and just how, if we want to reimagine our streets, what that is really going to take is the political challenge of doing that. Is it really needs to be at the forefront of these conversations around reimagining and reallocating street space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think my hot take is likely that roadways need management. And, we like to think we do a great job of maximizing the highest and best use of every little piece of real estate that is our road and our curb. But we don't do a great job. And what we've seen and what I've seen over my career, and I remember like 20 years ago, I was doing a real-time data project here in San Francisco, and that you don't need real-time data to do a lot of this stuff. And you can effectively manage your roadways and your curbs and use static data. So I think that's where I'll start, is like this idea that more data sometimes isn't actually the best thing for civic management. But
Yeah.
it's a little hot.
That is a hot take.
Who's going to spicy out spicy?
Yeah, so to add some spice to that, I think that there's absolutely a role for static data and historic data, and I think we don't have enough of that to make informed decisions about our roadway. That being said, I think there's probably also a role for some dynamic and real-time data, but we have to be very mindful of the privacy, limitations of that data sharing. So I think we are really going to evolve our discussion so we can really find this, this ideal balance between the need for data and this, and all of our genuine concerns around privacy. But I'll turn back to this idea of, should we continue on?
Yeah, well let's kind of scratch the surface of Ariel's a little bit, in just terms of, both of you kind of allude to this idea of infrastructure adaptation, but also it's how necessarily our current infrastructure, it's not that complicated to be able to to use what we have, but how do we use what we have and evolve it for the future?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot there. And building off Molly's point around the role of static data and the role of thinking dynamically about our curb space. So, at a fundamental level, a curb is it's higher concrete, right, when we really think about it. And it's in doing that, in building up the concrete, it's signaling something to us. It's saying this now has a different use in our cities. And for a long time, we've had that big use of those concrete to be for parking, for the storage of motor vehicles. And over time, our priorities have shifted, and what we want to use that lane for has shifted as well. At the same time, there's even more demands on our curb space. We all know this, like ride hail, delivery, biking, the use case, one-way car share, parked car share. The demands on this asset have just grown. And so how do we manage it? How do you effectively manage it? And there's a growing body around, we have to curb the chaos, right? We have to take this thing, we have to tame it. And sometimes I think of these bucolic cities where this curb is like this, fanciful and perfect asset in our cities. And to some extent, I think that might be just an impossibility. Do we have to accept some level of chaos on a curb? And that's why we live in cities. Cities are dynamic. They're not they're bucolic in their own way, but they're dynamic. And so our curb is always going to be this chaotic space. But the idea is, how much chaos can we accept at the curb, and what are we trading off? And when we're not, minimizing that chaos. And again, what does success look like? What does our tamed curb look like? I don't think we're going to have a chaos-free curb. We're never going to have a chaos-free city. But what does that tamed curb look like? And what is the role of AVs in figuring that out? What is the role of static data? What is the role of dynamic data? And helping us just really achieve a more useful space for many different modes.
Well, I think we could also say, and I'd be interested, Molly, in your take on this too, that are all curbs fully utilized? And the most chaotic locations in cities usually are the ones with the highest commercial density. But that doesn't mean that there aren't locations blocks away that that aren't as chaotic. And so is there kind of a needle you can thread where maybe there's this future where our idea of how we incentivize a pickup and drop off transaction is not just right in front of a high density, high utilized location?
Interesting, yeah. Well, I'm really interested in like trying to understand the data tools that exist now, right? We know that data brokers like INRIX or others have brought some really interesting data to the table to sort of demonstrate the usage patterns of our curbs that can inform city planners and cities as they think about ways to build dynamic curbs. Where should these dynamic curbs be, right? Like you're pointing out, not every curb needs to be dynamic. Some have somewhat fixed uses, and maybe they change it from time of day, but they're not going to change so much dynamically during the day. And there's really there's no future in which you could imagine that there'd be a need for that. But yeah, there are other places where the curbs are, very sought after. And I think that, and of course that varies so much between a city environment and a more suburban environment and a rural environment in which you have much different demands for curbs and much different interest in this topic at the very start. But I think where we're going to see innovation is just trying to provide planners the data they need to make decisions about which places should we consider to be hotspots, and then how do we target those hotspots in a way that really works for the community there, because each of those hotspots are going to have their own sort of unique set of dynamics that may require a unique solution that can be informed by data, but it won't just be ADS data for a long time. AV ride-hail data is not going to be the only data source that's needed to inform our curb usage, right? We know that delivery, parking is the bulk, is the lion's share of the curb usage. So I think this is really so to bring AVs into the mix is really about understanding that there will be a need for touchless systems, that don't require to initiate a specific, if you're going to have a system in which you have micropayments, right, you'd have to have a system that would enable a vehicle to do that without having to, use a specific app. So I think that would, but maybe not every single curb would have to have that type of functionality because it could be, there could be some cost limitations. So we've been thinking a lot about this. How do you inform and update a pickup and drop off, recognizing that you don't have to reinvent the wheel for every single block. You may be able to pilot in different places and figure out what works for different communities.
And I would add on that so at Waymo, if any of you have ever taken a Waymo before and you open up your app and you're like, I want to go to the Commonwealth Club, Waymo might not drop you off right in front. We often tell our users that you're going to need to walk to your curb and to walk to your drop off or your pickup for that matter. And the reason that we do that is one of the reasons is, being a courteous road user is part of our curb, our pickup and drop off strategy. It's part of that. It's a principle built into how we define where we're going to pick you up or drop you off. And so part of that is being thoughtful about other road users. Is there a safe location where we can pick you up? Is this a place where there is too much chaos and the Waymo driver, it's too complicated to navigate and we want to make sure there's a spot where it's safer for you and for other people around you. So really thinking about how the Waymo driver interacts with others on the street will determine your drop-off spot. And I think that's really neat that from the get-go, Waymo has not set that expectation with our users, that we will not necessarily drop you off or pick you up exactly where you want to go. And on that note, the project that we're working on together is around using historical curb data to help us with planning our cities. And the idea here is that we know cities need data. The data is really important and helpful, but as to Billy's first point, that we're not really doing things in real time in our cities. I would love if planning were a real-time exercise. Unfortunately, it's often a very, very, very longitudinal exercise. And so what we're doing is we're taking historical curb data from a few sections in San Francisco and analyzing it and seeing if it helps us figure out, hey, where should there be a loading zone? Hey, is this a good candidate for a dynamic curb at one day? What are the characteristics of this space? And then in particular, when it comes to the data, what types of obfuscation and aggregation techniques can we put on this historical curb data to make sure that we're keeping user privacy safe? So I'm really excited about this project. Like I said, I get to talk to these guys, weekly and get to think about curbs, but I think for Waymo, it's about how can we start and add to this conversation around how we can make our streets safer, how we can bring tame our curb more, and how can our data be a part of that conversation.
Wow, we have a project.
I know, it's exciting.
Well, I think to go back to my hot take, I think these folks have heard my story about way back when I was a WE planner, and I was a lead transportation planner for UC Berkeley, and I think one of the things that we found we got at the same time SF Park was going forward, which is a big project, $40 million FHWA project funded here. We had a mini project, only $3 million with the city of Berkeley and UC Berkeley to try to do real-time parking. And what we found, and this is why I think everybody seems to have forgotten these lessons, because we found both in San Francisco and in Berkeley that we weren't doing real-time pricing. We weren't doing real-time, when you were driving across the Bay Bridge to come from San Francisco, no customer wanted the price of their parking space to change before they got to the parking space. And also, we had a pretty good indication in terms of what was happening, just looking at monthly snapshots in terms of parking availability, both in Berkeley and in San Francisco, that we could make sophisticated pricing decisions to free up spaces on street for businesses that want transactions, and also encourage people to use off-street structured parking. Of course, how does that relate to automated vehicles? Well, to a certain degree, it's kind of challenging this idea that we need to have a real-time exchange of information at the curb. I don't actually know that that's the case, and that's the thing. That's why my hot take is unless you're doing dynamic policy, dynamic data doesn't really matter, because you can make really good policy off of obfuscated, data that we actually figure out how do we protect people's privacy, protect proprietary interests, but also make sure that we serve the public good with that data. That's why my hot take really has to do this rewind this idea that you always need dynamic information. Am I annoying you with this Molly? Because you had a little pushback on me on this a little bit.
Team dynamic.
Yeah, well, we disagree a little bit on this, but I do understand that a lot of data can be a lot of information can be gleaned from historic data, absolutely. And I think that the role for dynamic data is going to be, it will need to be tested, right? To really decide when is it going to be useful and what scenarios would it be useful, and maybe even pinpoint those scenarios so that you don't have to collect every single data point, but instead really determine which areas could be dynamically changed throughout a day or a month, or because of a specific event. And if there was those events or those locations, could you tailor a dynamic system that could target those areas rather than collecting information on just absolutely everywhere? Maybe that's the solution, and it can also avoid some of the privacy concerns. That being said, I'm not willing to throw away the mobility data standard, which has been developed for so long, which many cities, hundreds of cities across the country and the world, are relying on to share data from some mobility devices to inform planning decisions and to keep the public safe, right? So. And of course, that system, they're toying with this idea of micropayments, which I think is really fascinating. Micro subsidies, I think, is what they're calling it, right? So there's some really great innovation happening within that space. Once you build this data architecture, it enables some innovation that may end up helping to address problems that we weren't even aware of until you have that dynamic set of data and the possibility to do that, right? So it may open up ideas.
We should say, I'm really struggling with this mic thing. But we should say you and I disagreed in terms, I don't know that everybody in the audience is going to know what Mobility Data Specification, or MDS, is, or Mobility Data Standard. But yeah, so
I thought it was a nerdy audience.
There's some, wow. I don't think we use that term here. So we were on a panel for the California Public Utilities Commission over the summer. Molly and I were, and I have to say the challenge with some of these data standards is they don't map up. The existing data standards don't precisely marry up to what an automated vehicle does in a roadway.
Absolutely.
And I think one thing we should be super transparent on too, and I know Waymo, I know Ariel, you all have done a lot to make pickup and drop off, at least attempt to make it safer for bicycles and pedestrians, and maybe that's something you can talk about. But the fact is, in California, based on the California Vehicular Code, an in-lane drop-off is perfectly legal. So, and technically, when you get to this thing, and I think what I debated this past summer was like, if you're not 18 inches from the curb, does that count as a drop-off? It's not, technically you have to be within a certain proximity threshold for it to be a drop-off that's not in lane. And so I think there's some stuff there that's both policy related, but also even if we have this data specification, it's not perfect, but we can still plan for infrastructure as well as protocols for all AV companies that create that safe transactional pickup and drop off from the vehicle. I mean, right, Ariel? I mean, like.
Yeah, I think the larger point stands is that we want our riders to feel safe and we want people outside the vehicle to be safe. And that's what it comes down to. I don't know if 18 inches is the right metric or the wrong metric, but what that communicates to me is you measure what matters, and there's an interest among all parties in making sure that pickups and drop-offs are safe. And that is the bottom line, and that is something that I think Waymo holds very clear, as I mentioned, having to walk to your stop or having to walk to your pickup to make sure that you're in a location that is safe. Being courteous, as courteous users of the curb is one of our guiding principles. We also have a system where if we are near or adjacent to a bike lane, if we have many cameras on our car, so if their bicyclist is coming, we will. There's a little alert that says cyclist approaching, so you know not to open your door to avoid dooring. So ways in which we can really be thoughtful users of the curb and then leverage our technology to make sure, again, that we are keeping people safe. So that to me is what it comes down to is, it's putting safety first and then figuring out. And then having it flow from there, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So if anybody, I haven't gotten any cards, but if there are questions within the audience, feel free to write them. I want to ask a couple more questions of my panelists as well, just in terms of what you see from particularly if our goal is also to reduce VMT. And I think a lot of people in the room, and including, I think many of our companies, and I think we should say, like, fleet operators like Waymo don't want to operate to have empty miles on the road that are non-revenue miles. I'm just guessing. But, how do we actually manage roads and curbs to actually reduce VMT?
So the way I think about it is from many different angles. First and foremost is to Billy's point, Waymo's a fleet, and so it does not behoove us to drive around aimlessly. Every mile for us comes with risk and it comes with cost. And so we're really thoughtful about how we deploy our fleet, where we deploy our fleet, and really matching that supply and demand. At the same time, and I think it's really important to talk about is, my colleague Adam puts it that shared mobility is a team sport. Waymo is not going to turn your city into a traffic sewer. It doesn't help us if our cars are stuck in traffic. We are no longer an attractive option. I always say that I work for Waymo, so I never have to get in one. In my 3 years at Waymo, I've probably been in a car less than a dozen times because I like to bike and I like to walk, and I like the idea of Waymo helping make our streets safer, and that's my interest in the technology. Which comes down to, I think, that Waymo is going to celebrate bike lanes in cities, is going to celebrate transit-only lanes, that all these modes really fit together to give people freedom of mobility in a city. So it's not a matter of take Waymo everywhere you need to go. It's a matter of take Waymo when you need it, bike when you can, take transit when it's the right option for you, and thinking about all of these as an ecosystem. And then how do you design your city so that all of these modes really are, so you're elevating the modes that you want people to take. In other words, you're elevating your transit, you're elevating biking, and to some extent, I think a shared, accessible, safe mode like Waymo also is part of that equation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I think the future in which we see the success of automation, I think, is, would be a shared mobility future. I think there's no success in an automated future that is personally owned and single occupant. We can all agree that would result in chaos and really a lot of concerns. And so, how do we build that future? I think it's about adding choice, right? So that means adding choices that are that are accessible to everyone, right? And meeting people's needs. If it's bike share, if it's scooter share, if it's an automated vehicle, if it's a driven vehicle, right? Having that suite of options that at different price points that are accessible to people, right? Making sure that we're targeting subsidies where it's necessary, so that you're really making sure that people could meet their needs with this suite of mobility options. And we're working, UC Davis is evaluator on the LA Mobility Wallet, which is a basket of, basically it's providing people in the Southeast Los Angeles neighborhood with options to, besides, in addition to transit, so they can certainly use their mobility wallet to buy a transit pass. They can also use it to buy a Lyft or Uber, to buy a bike. They can actually go into a bike shop and buy a bike with their monthly allocation. And that's the kind of out-of-the-box thinking that we need in terms of trying to build accessible communities that work for people, right? It's not just, I'm a huge transit advocate, but in not every place is transit alone the right solution. So we need to build, a path towards finding the right suite of goods that will enable car shedding, maybe car sharing too.
Yeah.
both. And car shedding and really reduce the number of cars people have in their possession.
It's funny. We're actually teeing up the next speakers really well. So I know one of our speakers. It's not a huge reveal that I'm gonna say we're gonna have some statistics up here that are all about kind of how many people don't have access to a vehicle, how many people may have access to more than one vehicle, 2, 3, 4, and that clearly varies across many markets. But just because we know someone has access to a vehicle, doesn't mean we can't get them to leave that vehicle at home or parked in their garage, or we can get them to shed a vehicle, to give up a vehicle, although that's difficult once you have the asset to give it up. But if you're not using it, if you're using a shared service, then it's that's an expense for you on a monthly basis. But when we think about it, we think about the number of people that don't have access to a vehicle. And then we look at are all of them, do we know that all of them are well served by public transportation? And does public transportation have an opportunity now to think about these new modes for serving more people that are not served by vehicles? And I think that's really fascinating. I think hopefully we scratch the surface on that after our break. So we did have one question. Did you have anything
No, I
else
just
you wanted
really
to
like
add?
that phrase of adding choice and just putting that away in my brain.
Adding choice.
Adding choice, I think that's a nice way
Yeah.
of thinking about it. Because the status quo is also a choice, and so we were changing the status quo by adding more choices to help people get where they need to go.
And that's literally, everybody in the audience knows we a couple years ago did this project with Cruise with early rider data, and we found exactly that. When transit was at its, when it's at its least frequency in terms of service, what you did was you added this mode of transportation to the transportation choice set. And everybody didn't take it. We still had students that would, ride their bike without a light in the middle of the night when they were slightly inebriated. But I don't want to, and they shouldn't have been doing that probably. That's a ticketable offense. But the point is the Cruise vehicles at that time were providing a great service to our students that was an additional option for them, particularly in the off-peak hours when transit was less accessible. And so, it aligns exactly what everyone said. So our question here is actually very detailed in terms of, so what is the abutting of curb information with PII, and what are some examples of issues that might be risks to companies or consumers with sharing data at the curb in terms of their drop-off? Ariel, you're not an attorney, so if you just want to take a pass at this, because I don't know California PII, but I felt for a long time that sharing of rideshare data does kind of run afoul, particularly of GDPR, and so it just feels like it's an inherent risk.
Yeah, me not privacy attorney, but I think generally there's a sense of not being able to understand or track trips, so your behavior patterns, people going from A to B, and being able to tie that together with your broader movement in the city. So that's a big piece of the concern is, again, that idea of being able to to take someone's whole trip, knowing where they're going, when they're going, how often they're going. And so the more that you can obfuscate up from that is the idea. And what we're doing with our project, for example, is delinking your origin and your destination. So if the folks don't know you went from A to B, it's just A and it's just B. And then again, seeing how many layers up that we can get in obfuscation and still be able to successfully use that data to help plan our curb. That's the experiment that we're going to do as part of this project. So again, a lot of it comes down to the goal is to plan your curb. The goal isn't to understand people's movement in a city. So how do you take the data towards the goal of planning a curb without even getting near, I think, compromising user privacy?
Yeah, and I'll just add to that by saying, oh, it looks like there's a lot more questions. Okay, well, I'll just be brief.
It's all right. I'm spacing out. Just go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so I'll just add to that by saying that, of course, we know that de-anonymization is possible with trace mobility data, right, with point-to-point data. We also know that, there are examples of aggregate. There are many examples of successfully aggregated data sets that are still being used to make informed decisions, right? So the reality is that this data. There's a lot of data brokers out there doing data aggregation in such a way that does preserve privacy. So we can really learn a lot from the existing data collection practices. I think also I'll just say that it matters who has access to the data, right? The shared data commons operated by the USDOT is a good example in which they have a very carefully architected structure in which who can access what data set. And then, and some people can't access the raw data. They can only access a platform in which they can run, use an R-type tool to run statistical analysis. So that still allows some access to the information, but not the raw data. And so we can think, I think we can think creatively about how do we make good decisions using good data, which could be big data sets, and do so in a way that doesn't interfere with our privacy.
All right, so we're almost out of time for us. And we have four questions, but two of which I'm gonna cluster them. So I'm gonna tell, we have a lot of questions on how do we use AVs to benefit public transit and end up in autonomous heaven. I'm gonna postpone that question for our next segment because those are great questions, and there's a lot of ideas of partnership that I think will come out of our next panel. And I think even when we hear from Zoox, that's a real opportunity that they're really thinking about as well. But let's maybe conclude this with, I'm going to combine two other questions really focused around this idea of the block, the street, the physical infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And so how do we have physical infrastructure that is maximally protective of bicycles and pedestrians, but allows AVs to coexist with them? And as a second level, isn't on-street parking the real problem? And I would say, I think I know who wrote this question because I can recognize the penmanship, and I want to talk to you about this later. One of our very loyal fans.
That's hilarious. Well,
yes.
Are we chupistas? Please go ahead.
Yes. So what's the statistics, right? The average car is parked 95% of the time. Waymo cars are higher utilized. You have their, they're serving multiple people on multiple trips a day. And when they're not utilized, they're not on your curb. They're hanging. When they're sleeping at our depot, right? They're freeing up the streets for higher and better uses. So definitely, I think accessible, equitable, as a package and higher utilized throughout the day, I think is very important when we're thinking about the uses on our street. I can't remember your first question, but on the transit question, I do think that's a key part, like I was just speaking to around how does Waymo fit into that entire ecosystem? We did some work in Arizona around providing first last mile transit. It's also something we're thinking about here and looking at pricing. I know pricing and discounts can also support transit use with AV. So I think there's also a lot of creativity in that space. And to Sharon's point, a lot of room for collaboration with public sector and with transit agencies to figure out how do you serve effectively as that first last mile solution, and how do you have curb space available at transit stations to actually make that feasible.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'll come back to my hot take. I think this is a good way to close it out. So my hot take was about complete streets and connectivity. So this is speaking to your point on how do we make our streets safer, and how do we use, and I'll expand that. How do we use data to do so, right? Like how do bikes feel, how can bikes be more safe? So there's been some cool research happening from the UC. Jiaqi Ma at UCLA is leading a smart intersection project where they've outfitted an intersection to provide a bird's eye view to inform decisions on a connected car that they have built there. As the movement of bikes, this is a very busy UCLA intersection. It's very multimodal. It's kind of terrifying to see the number of scooters and bikes and cars that are coming through. And they can send that information to the vehicle and provide this view that is much, which is really an exciting opportunity. This doesn't necessarily need to be a fully decked out, full-on ADS vehicle with a LiDAR and the full suite of sensors. A relatively dumb car, but a new connected car theoretically could take information from that connected infrastructure and make a safety assessment based on it. There's also some really cool experimentation happening at UC Davis, led by Professor Junchen Zhang, about looking again at infrastructure to build computing power. So looking at the power of infrastructure and intersections to allow some of the data to be processed outside of the vehicle. This is how we build that suite of vehicles, some of which are going to have the computing power inside the vehicle, and that's amazing. But how do you build this suite and really target an intersection that might be a more chaotic intersection and enable people to access that, and do it safely, and protect more vulnerable road users while you're at it. So theoretically, these kind of pilots will really inform our efforts to expand, safety and really maybe achieve Vision Zero.
And I think we can acknowledge for one of the questions that, parking, it is an issue, right? And I think one of the things that we see in the future is that potentially there is an opportunity to revolutionize roadways to reclaim some of that right-of-way for other uses, and maybe not automated vehicle uses, right? Maybe for dedicated transit lanes, maybe for bicycle and pedestrian space, maybe for urban greening projects, water retention, filtration, et cetera. So really an opportunity to, I'll quote myself, to end the road.
Nice.
And re-envision the street
Yes.
as the heart of the city.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Very
This has been a
fun.
delightful
Thank you.
conversation. Thank you for the questions. We are going to take a little break. We invite you to socialize, ask questions, but don't leave, because we've got an amazing afternoon. I think some of what you'll hear from Ron Thaniel later in terms of how they're sharing data back with cities on roadway infrastructure that actually benefits bicycles and pedestrians could be really provocative. I think one thing we can also say is, and from some of our student research, is that we are seeing automated vehicles meter traffic or slow down slow down cars on our streets. And I was at Lighthouse last week, and Sharon invited me to give a talk there, and I said, what's the number one thing we could do in San Francisco to save lives tomorrow? And it'd be 20 is plenty.
Thank you for coming back. Thank you for staying for the second part of this event. I'm very glad you could all make it today, and I'm also personally very glad I could make it, because it's the first time that I'm physically attending this event. I was participating online at a few occasions, so that's really an honor. My name is Henriette Cornet. I work at USF. I'm teaching there, and I'm also a co-director with Professor Rix of the AV and the City Initiative. So we are very glad to have put this program together, and I hope you like it so far. Now we will take a bit of distance, looking what's happening somewhere else in the world, in Europe. The background of that, and why I wanted to select some of the initiatives to show you today, is because I was working there for several years, and my role there was to coordinate and to be involved in European projects, usually funded by the European Commission, but also third-party funded projects. And there, we have a specific vision about autonomous mobility services that I want to share with you. And gladly, also now, I'm very proud to be now in the US, based in California, and starting working here. And I really hope I can also help make some bridge with what's happening in Europe and now in US. So let's have a look at few vehicles that I'm sure you are familiar with some of them. Maybe some of them you don't know yet. I won't be surprised. And my question would be, what is the common point between these vehicles? So yes, they are autonomous. You can think about that, being in this conference today, in this symposium today. But actually, what's unique about them is they are all integrated and operated, or soon to be integrated and operated by public transport operators. They are part of public-private partnerships. They are part of bigger projects together to see how can we put this vehicle on the ground to make sense from a public transit point of view. We have on the left side up a vehicle from Volkswagen, which is a collaboration with MOIA. I will say a word more about MOIA, which is a ride-pooling service company, together with the city of Hamburg, and more specifically the public transit authority, Hamburger Hochbahn. They are working together with the amazing, completely kind of crazy goals of putting 10,000 AVs on the streets of Hamburg in 2030. We are following that very closely and see what will happen in the coming years, but it's very promising. I will say a word about their model. On the left downside, we have the shuttles from EasyMile. You may know them. They have been around for a very long time. And actually, I mean, it's a French product, actually. And you may have noticed that from my accent that I'm French too, so maybe that's my way to also acknowledge this technology, because they started a long time ago, and they actually open up a road of making, I would call it a mental model of having AVs for shared mobility. So I'm very grateful to these products. I think they are nice. There's still a room for improvement, but they'll get there. And what was unique in this service here in Frankfurt, it was in Germany, in Frankfurt, it was fully integrated to the public transit service. I would say also a word about that. But last but not least, a zoom on Oslo. There, they are starting a collaboration with Mobileye to equip some vehicles and make them part also of their public transit system. So the public transport operator and authority there is called Router. And they have also incredible ambitions for AVs. So if you work in the sphere of, in the area of AVs, you need to talk to them because they really have a lot of ambition there. And I think we will hear more and more in the future about Router. Let's zoom back briefly from Europe. If you're interested in pilot activities in Europe, I advise you to go on this website, connectedautomatedDriving.eu. And you can see, oh, I'm so sorry, the contrast is not that good. You can imagine that's a map of Europe, just there, actually. So yeah, more or less the point that you can see from Spain to so UK, Sweden over there. And if you go there, you will see in the blue point are all the pilot sites on open roads. So we have a lot of open road, public road demonstration piloting already, ongoing, and many more. So go there, you can have a look and find a lot of information. In general, this website is a great database. Let's zoom briefly on Frankfurt and what's happening there, what I mentioned to you earlier with this integration within the public transport system. They have deployed shuttles over there on fixed routes, but the routes are flexible, so it will depend on where the person wants to go, where the passengers want to go, because they have virtual stops all over this area and pick-up and drop-off point all over this area. This has been discussed with the city locally, with the regions, the local authorities. And what was very nice in this project, it was connecting a retirement home with a grocery store. And it was deployed so long that the people could really use it in their daily life. And we got nice feedback. The people could also, the passengers could book a ride from their smartphone, or they could also call. So there was both possibility to have this service happening. What's unique about the vision for Frankfurt is really the way they want to deploy more and more autonomous services. And also the mindset, which I like very much, starting with demand-responsive transport that they have now, which in US, I think you call it paratransit services, where passengers will call in advance and say, oh, tomorrow at that time, I would like to have a ride. This exists already, but they want to move from this service to something on demand, meaning you use this app and you can have more flexibility in booking your ride. So increasing the on-demand services and having more and more of this service, because they are very expensive when you have a driver, and we have issue of shortage of drivers in Europe, having part of this service being made by autonomous vehicles. What you can see also is the traffic performance. What is meant is they have a number of vehicles operating today, a number of persons driving around. They want to have more ridership, meaning having other persons that cannot drive today, that don't have access to any mobility service, or taking some of the person riding a car that could then use this type of service. And the scheduled public transport is the backbone of mobility. We don't touch that. We make it better, of course, but it stays and it will stay there because they have also its purpose to bring the people to the city center, for instance. Having a quick look at Hamburg, because I think it's unique. So Moja, as I mentioned, is an on-demand ride-pooling company doing all the pooling of vehicles that you can see here on the right, and they are targeting shared ride. It was mentioned before, I think Molly in the previous panel mentioned this idea of shared mobility, which I think is the future that we should target to if you want to reduce the number of vehicles on the road. And in this type of setting, I can imagine work very nicely, because you are not in a small space with someone, but you have a little bit of privacy and comfort all over the ride. They're also targeting the private car from the modal shift from Hamburg that you can see there. And what's also unique, they have been recognized as official part of the public transit system. So they can get integrated within subsidiary system of the city, having, for example, if they go in this area in dark blue, they will get extra subsidies to go there. So it's a very interesting model. And when you have that with drivers, it's kind of a natural step, the same way that it was in Hamburg, to move towards autonomous mobility. They are collaborating with Volkswagen and their ID bus that is equipped with Mobileye technology. This picture is actually a picture from Austin, because they will deploy this vehicle there in the US, but also in Hamburg, planned around 2026. And it's planned to be the first type-approved autonomous driving MaaS system. So MaaS stands for Mobility as a Service. This idea of having a seamless mobility that you can book, and it takes you all over the ride, independently from the mode of transport that you are using. If we look at some figures that they have put together from a simulation conducted with the University of Munich, University of Karlsruhe, looking at having 10,000 AVs, so this ambition that they have on the road, it will make 4.5 million of rides with an occupancy of 2.2% per kilometer. We could reach a decrease of car traffic on the road, having more public transport, more ridership with Moja, and a slight improvement of biking and pedestrian, probably use also to safer streets that will make the streets more enjoyable for biking and pedestrians. So that's my last slide, and this is from Oslo, directly taken from Oslo, where I was a few weeks ago, looking at what Ruter is doing there. Keep your eyes open with their projects. There's going to be something very nice coming out of it. And their motto, the sentence I repeat all the time, is our goal is sustainable freedom of movement for all. I think we should keep that in mind. I really like from the previous panel hearing of choices. I think it's also important in this context. So sustainable choices, make sure that our impact on sustainability will be the best. And for this, later we'll have in the panel a discussion about that, about the future, about sustainability. But before that, since we are the AV and the City initiative, I would like, that's my last slide, but the next one, exactly. I would like to welcome on stage Julia Friedlander from SFMTA, who will talk to us of her vision. We'll ask some questions that we can use then for the panel later. Julia, thank you very much, and welcome on stage.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Let's see, get started. Okay. How will AVs impact our cities and what policies would ensure sustainable and just outcomes? These are actually not my questions. These are the questions that are the framework for Professor Riggs' initiative at USF. And I'm sorry to say that I'm not going to be answering those questions. Instead, what I'm going to be doing is complexifying those questions a little bit because, of course, cities are not all the same. And if you wanted to choose 2 cities in the US to start AV deployment, and you wanted to choose 2 cities that illustrate profound differences, you would choose Phoenix and San Francisco. We have many things in common. We have wonderful weather. We have super smart people who love their city. And we also have early AV deployments. But in many other ways, our transportation systems are quite different. And we need to think about these questions from the perspective of different kinds of cities with different transportation systems. So first, what are some of the differences? Well, the most important or the most obvious is just population density. This is not really to scale, and I have to apologize that some things are Maricopa County, some things are cities. They're not exactly apples to apples. It's not easy to get that. But the San Francisco has the 5th highest population density of any county in the United States of America. There are many wonderful things about that. We are also geographically a very small city. Phoenix couldn't be more different. I'm not sure where it ranks on county population density, but it's too low to get there very easily with a Google search. So that suggests that this is certainly an explanation for probably some of the challenges that the industry has had in San Francisco. The Phoenix road system is probably much more, is an easier place to test out automation. And it also has some other implications about what the benefits of driving automation may be, and also some of the things for us to worry about. So, how will differences in household motor vehicle availability affect the use and impacts of AVs in cities? I'm just going to put a few questions out there. Unbelievable differences, and Professor Riggs mentioned this earlier. 25% of the households in San Francisco do not have a motor vehicle available. Now, this comes from the American Community Survey, and I have to say I don't love the question because it makes it sound as if the norm and the necessity is to have a motor vehicle available. And that is maybe not the case, and if 25% of people in San Francisco don't have access to a motor vehicle, for some of them that's because they can't afford it. For some of them, it's because there's nobody in the household who has the ability to drive or the inclination to drive. But in many cases, I think that what we would see if we ask the question of why, it's because many people live in San Francisco precisely because the transportation system enables them to get where they want to go without having a motor vehicle. If you look at that 25%, almost as many households in Phoenix have 3 or 4 vehicles, as in San Francisco have no vehicles available. So these obviously have implications for how the unbelievably magical machines that we have seen on our streets may affect our city. So the crash fatality rate in San Francisco is a crisis for us in San Francisco, and it looks good when compared to Maricopa County. The Maricopa County crash fatality rate is 3 times the San Francisco rate on a per 100,000 resident basis. And we have a great deal of optimism that AV driving can and will improve the safety of our system, if for no other reason than because of its speed compliance. There are many, many drivers in San Francisco who do honor the speed limit, but AVs have demonstrated, as far as we can tell, a high level of speed compliance. And that is a great fact because speed is the biggest killer on our streets. So, next question. How will differences in our transportation infrastructure investments affect the impacts of AVs on cities? there are significant differences. And one of the things that makes it possible to see this, if you're a cyclist in San Francisco, you may be frustrated that only 3% of our street network gives you the opportunity to ride a bike in a protected bike lane. But that looks enormous when you compare it to the Phoenix streets, where only 1.1% of the street network has protected bike lanes. This is something that the city has been, the cyclists in San Francisco and the SFMTA have been trying to increase for years. Literally decades of work has gone into this kind of investment in creating safe space for cyclists. And it is one of those things that we are on the one hand, like I think many cyclists trust riding around AVs more than they do riding around human drivers, and others feel differently. And that is a matter of perhaps cyclist experience, but this infrastructure investment that has been made in San Francisco is a key issue. Next, how will differences in transit infrastructure and ridership affect differences in AV impacts? Once again, very, very different. Both Phoenix and San Francisco started building their rail transit systems in the 19th century. In San Francisco, that was the 1873 creation of our cable car system. And just about 10 years later, Phoenix started their light rail system. And sadly, I believe that it was essentially abandoned shortly after World War II in around 1948. And it was replaced mostly with motor vehicles. In San Francisco, there have been many, many generations of continuous investment in both our rail transit infrastructure and in our bus transit infrastructure. And you can see that in the ridership, and you can understand the importance when you look at those streets and our population density of our transit first policy, which is a 50-year policy in San Francisco, that it reflects the fact that we need to move a lot of people on our very constrained streets as quickly and safely as possible. So I put these questions on the table because there's a lot of talk about how AVs can support transit. Certainly one of those ways is by providing service in periods where our transit service is lightest, and the evenings are one of those times. We hope that we will see opportunities for AVs to be delivering people to our transit system when it is rich and robust, which is in many, many hours of the day. And I'm going to stop here and just put these issues on the table for us to think about not cities as one thing, but cities as very, very different kinds of places where the existing transportation infrastructure is a key factor to think about. And I believe that brings me back there. Indeed. I'm going to leave this right here. Thank you.
Oops. Thank you so much, Julia, for these questions. I think it will help our next session that we will have. And I really like the way you mentioned this. There is not only one city. We used to say also like not solution fits it all. And we will need to look at the various environments and riders and so on for sure. Okay, let's move on to our next panel, and I will be the moderator for this panel, very gladly. And I will call the various names on stage. I hope everybody is around. Yes. For now, I will sit here so that I can also gather questions. You still have some cards lying around that you can use for questions, and I will gather them over here. But without further ado, let me call on stage Tim Hale, Executive Director of Contra Costa Transportation Authority. Where is Tim? Here. Perfect. Our next panelist is Dr. James Fischelson, Executive Director of PASS at UC Berkeley.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Dr. Sven Beiker, Managing Director at Silicon Valley Mobility and lecturer at Stanford University.
Thanks.
Okay, so welcome to all of you. Very happy that you could make it, and welcome on stage. So before we start, I'm sure with everything that you have heard, you will have some comments, you will want to come back on certain things. And if I can give a bit of a tone for this panel to come, it will be really this, what we just discussed, Julia and I, on sustainability. I think that we should keep that in mind, and how AVs plays a role there, and also looking forward, looking to the future, what is coming and what our hopes and so on. So, oops, little adjustment.
Keep going, yeah. There we go. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so before that, I would suggest you present yourself one after the other, and if you could say specifically to the audience a bit your view, and I will have some detailed questions later, but you will just say, how are you active in this area right now? So Sven, do you want to start?
Sure, happy to. Well, you introduced me already as Sven Biker. Great to be here. And I'm an independent consultant. I cover the topics of automated driving, electric mobility as well, and a few other innovative topics as well. And I'm a lecturer at Stanford Business School, where I tackle the questions around strategy for the evolving automotive industry, basically asking these questions: what can newcomers do in order to get in, and what can the established automotive industry do in order to remain relevant? So really what interests me is, on one hand, I'm an engineer. I'm really interested in technology and to develop innovative, desirable, safe, and so on products, but also how this industry shapes up. And that's basically where I'm finding me a lot today. Which is, on the one hand, I advise my clients on technology roadmaps, but more recently I've picked up some work actually on the regulatory side of things. So I actually end up on a UN level where all the regulation that is forthcoming, and you mentioned type approval in your presentation, how all of this is being harmonized across different countries and regions and everything, to make sure that especially automated vehicles, which is a group that I'm part of, will be safe and hopefully sustainable.
Thank you. James?
Hey, everybody. I'm James Fischelson. I'm the executive director at California Path at UC Berkeley. We're a research center that was founded back in 1986 in partnership with Caltrans to really focus on advanced transportation technologies. And we've been doing this for almost 40 years, but honestly, our mandate hasn't changed that much. We really try to take this work from more of the pure academic setting and find ways that we can deploy it in the real world. And we're probably most famous, since I know Steve, hey, Steve is here, for doing a lot of automated vehicle work back in the 90s and 2000s. And I guess that will go to what I'm most interested in, and it maybe perhaps sounds a little bit corny, but I love transportation because it's one of the few fields that we can work in where if you do it right, you can actually make life better for everybody for many generations to come. I'm from the New York metro area. We still benefit from the subways that were dug over a century ago. Now, is it guaranteed that is going to happen? No, but I still have faith that automated vehicles can be that type of enabling technology, and that's why I'm here.
Great. My name's Tim Hale. I'm the executive director of Contra Costa Transportation Authority. So if you don't know a little bit about CCTA, we're located in the East Bay, San Francisco Bay Area. You might know where Walnut Creek is at, Richmond, Antioch, those wonderful cities. We are one of the self-help counties. We collect a half-cent sales tax in Contra Costa County. Deliver about a $2.7 billion of programs and projects. But I think one of the unique things that I think we're known as an agency is we've been testing autonomous vehicles for 10 years now at Gomentum Station, and it's one of the largest secured autonomous vehicle test beds in the country. And what I think is really fascinating about Gomentum Station is that we have really created a public-private partnership and an ecosystem. And so we like to say that we kind of have a front row seat to the future, and we take a lot of what we see and what we learn at Gomentum Station, and we implement it in a lot of our projects. And so we were one of the first agencies in the state of California to test a purpose-built vehicle on public roads. We did that back in 2016, and we've been building upon that ever since. And so we are currently operating a purpose-built shuttle for public use. It's free. Any of you can go ride it down in Bishop Ranch. It's open Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 5:30. And then we're working on other deployments in Contra Costa County I think are really unique, and I'm sure I'll be talking about them during the panel. But so that's kind of a unique area that we're in, and how we kind of fit into the space.
Great, thank you all. And what I really like of having you now on stage is the diversity of perspectives that we can get, having someone really from the authority perspective, the research, and then consultant on the tech side. I think it fits very well. And my first question, I think I will start with you, James.
Yeah, sure.
Being from the academia, my vision, because I was myself in academia many years, is like you are always seeing like upfront what is coming, right? You are on the.
I mean, we like to think so. I can't say we always do.
So, what are the things now that are the most exciting for you? What you see, let's say for now, out there or in the near future? Let's not look too much in the future. We'll do that a bit later. But like the things now that when you read news about it, you're like, oh, that's kind of exciting.
So I'd say that's a little bit of a harder question than I'd like, but a really good one. Because I think you almost have two sides of it. You have the tech side, and that's a lot of what we do in academia and industry. So like before this, I was at Ford. And it's been really impressive to me how quickly so many of the AV companies and the industry as a whole have been addressing certain problems. So I think it is easy at times to pick on some of the problems. And I know Julia, who was just speaking, deals with them at a very personal level with AVs operating in the cities. But I think it is fair to commend just how much better that they have gotten over time, just how many fewer incidents, how many fewer emergencies there are, but it is still far from settled. The other thing on the tech side, and this is when I think it's not honestly what I deal with academically, but in my mind, it has not been commented on enough just how far the traditional OEMs have come in offering L2 type services. If we were having this conversation a few years ago, we would be talking about Tesla's Autopilot, which everyone likes to make fun of. We don't need to go into that in too much detail, and maybe GM Super Cruise. Now, I know it's super limited, but you can buy a Mercedes that offers a version of level 3 automation right now. That is amazing. And I think it is notable, which we may get to later, the market has really spoken in terms of people are willing to pay for these advanced driver assistance technologies. The other thing that I will say, the last bit I'll add, is I'm really excited about what we can do over the next 5 years. I think as a field, and I was joking with Steve about this a little bit ago. I think, Steve, how long have you been working on automated vehicles? Since the 70s, is that fair to say? Yeah. So automated vehicles have been 5 years away for what, the last 30 or so now? And we all like to joke about that, but I think one of the problems is it's really easy to imagine the Jetsons type world, the future world where all the cars can talk to each other and are fully automated. And it's fun to think about all the amazing things we can do, and honestly, there's way too much academic research that was looking into that sort of spherical cow hypothetical. However, the real interesting questions for me are, what can we do now? What are the next 5 years going to look like? Automated vehicles aren't 5 years away. They are here now. And the decisions that we are making as a field and as a society now will dictate the impact that automated vehicles will have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice. I like also that you mentioned the work of OEMs, because it was not that much present in the symposium so far, but a lot is happening there. And I will have a question later on if any bridges exist between what the OEMs are doing and all the work that I see we, meaning the AV in the City initiative on having more discussions with Waymo and Cruise and so on. We can keep that for later.
Yep.
But I will ask the same question also to you, Sven. What is the most exciting, if it is like a development, something you read in the news or follow or work with your clients that you can share?
Well, let's see, the most exciting, I would say, and that profoundly actually has changed my perspective on the technology of automated driving is having tried Waymo, self-driving without a driver now a little bit over a year ago. So the little story is that a friend of mine who actually works at Waymo asked me if I wanted to try it. And I said, well, I live in Palo Alto, really. I need to go to San Francisco to get another one of these demos. Really, what's the point? But I wanted to play nice because I really appreciate the friend. It's like, okay, if you want to show me your thing, okay, fine, I'll come. And really blown away how well it worked and still works, actually. And that it really went way beyond my imagination as an automotive engineer, what has been accomplished by that team. There was early April last year, and then a month later I said, well, in order to give my clients a little bit more of a spectrum, I tried Cruise. Then in May of last year, and I was also very impressed how far they had come. There were nuances here and there that I then discussed with clients and also others who tried it. Some of them here actually in the audience, and then again Steve, when we had the automated road transportation symposium. Henriette, you were there as well, and Billy, and everybody who attended that conference was free to basically try these amazing creations, shall I say. So that obviously I'm getting excited about. This is how much excitement you get from a German engineer on stage. And that is really something where I say, wow, is there something that I just don't fathom? How is that possible? And I'm still like, well, was I maybe judging the field or something? And then I was like, well, okay, we are not done yet. And that's maybe, again, the German engineer who says, okay, still the glass is half empty and it's not half full. So we still, I think, need the infrastructure that needs to be worked on. We still need, I think, to figure out a business model to really turn it into something that is also economically sustainable. And yes, I think this is what we're going to discuss more, and there were really good presentations here already, how to integrate this with the existing transportation system that we have, so that it does not become something like what we saw with ride-hailing, for instance, that once those showed up, in particular in New York City, I think, that ridership in public transportation goes down. That's maybe not what we want. So that's all what I'm really interested in, what I'm excited about. And one thing, I'm not sure if it was mentioned here at all throughout the symposium this afternoon, China. I mean, there's so much happening in China. I hear all the pilots that they have there, and they obviously have a different, shall I say, relationship between the public and the private sector. And so that's something that I'm trying to follow as well. But
have you tried any vehicles over there?
No, I have not. I have not been to China in 5 years now, for some obvious and maybe other less obvious reasons. But so amazing what's happening there as well, and we shall see where that's going. So that's my enthusiasm.
Thank you so much. What about you, Tim? What is the thing currently, like, or very near-term future?
Well, I think it goes along those same lines as what my colleagues are saying here, but I feel like, the technology's here. Like, we can walk outside, I was standing on the curb here, taking a phone call, and there's autonomous vehicles driving outside, and so I think it's exciting. I was in Phoenix 2 weeks ago, and they're all over the place. In some cases, they were faster than an Uber, and so it's really exciting to see we're moving, hopefully, away from talking about pilots and really starting to talk about deployment, right? And actually, and getting to and we're already talking about commercialization and, business plan, business rules, et cetera, and how it's going to integrate into society, et cetera. So I think that's why I think it's really exciting. I think the thing that's really exciting, I think, for us is what are the opportunities in terms of how this technology can be really integrated. We're really focused on a lot of specific use cases, at CCTA, and in Contra Costa County, we're not San Francisco. Some cases we're kind of like Phoenix, we've got more of a suburban, feel. And we're really thinking about, how do we really leverage this technology to make the transit system better, right? And thinking about how do we use automated vehicles to really address the gaps between land use and transportation. And those are some of the projects that we're working on. And, we're working on a project for a county hospital. How do we get this technology to support the healthcare system? There are so many people that don't have access to vehicles because of, and they're not able to get the medical appointments. In Contra Costa County, there's 40% of people that cannot get the medical appointments because of the lack of transportation. In Contra Costa County, there's 1 in 4 people that do not have access to public transportation. So how do we get those 1 in 4 people to public transportation? And I think autonomy is going to be a great way to fill the gaps in the system and really truly bring that true personalized customer experience to the public transportation system. And that's what gets me really excited about what's happening now and what we're going to see in the near-term future.
And I would have a question, because you mentioned that you are operating, you have a collaboration now ongoing with a shuttle provider. How do you see in the future, and that's based on the work I did in Europe, where we were trying to bridge really the authority on one side, the operators, the shuttle providers, etc. At some point, when it's within a research project, it's kind of okay in doing, but when we want to move to what we call pre-commercial, commercial deployment, it becomes very tricky in terms of procurement, mandating, and all and all. So how do you deal with that? Do you have already, maybe this is research, but do you have already plans on how you will manage to mandate this type of players in the future?
So we have a couple examples. So one is, for the Bishop Branch project, that was a federal highway grant. Mm-hmm. And so we went out to procurement. We actually had a solicitation to, so we basically looked at the project, looked at the use case, developed system requirements, same way you would develop a technology project. And we had a list of system requirements. We put it out to market. And basically we got proposals and we select the best technology for that use case, and that ranges because, for example, for the Bishop Branch project, it was, low speed, under 25 miles an hour, first and last mile, and it was a good use case for, a purpose-built shuttle, like the Navia shuttle, for example. Same thing. So right now we're working on a project with a senior community center, and we did another procurement for that project. Mm-hmm. And similar type of thing.
There is not a lot of competitors, right?
Yeah, there's not a lot of competition. So in that particular case, we're now working with Beep on that project, but we're using a different shuttle because honestly, the Navia shuttle, not a great shuttle. Okay. Just going to put it out there. You all know this, right?
It's not even Navia anymore.
You all know that, right? That's old technology, right? It's 10-year-old technology, right? And so now what we're doing is we're moving. So if you might remember, Local Motors went out of business. Well, Beep bought the Local Motors Ollies, and then Ollie now is retrofitting it with an Oxbotica. So now, and I got the chance to basically do a commissioning of the vehicle at SunTrax in Florida. And so that vehicle is fantastic. Still 25 miles an hour, but definitely light years ahead of where we're at with Navia. I'm still begging Zoox to come out to Rossmore. I don't know where Phil's at, but but I think Rossmore is a great use case where we're looking at, how do we use these purpose-built shuttles to get seniors from their homes to the community center because they still need independence at that age. Right now, they're having to rely on people to, call their friend to literally take them a mile down the road to go to bingo down the street. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of really taking a people-centered approach of how to use autonomy. And then similarly with May Mobility, We have the county hospital project. That project had to be on public roads, greater than 40, had to be at 45 mile an hour higher or lower. Obviously, purpose-built shuttles don't work in that ODD, and it had to be wheelchair accessible. So we went through a note with procurement. We hired May Mobility. Another project that we're working on, very exciting procurement, but we did a full-blown public-private partnership procurement. And we hired East Contra Costa County Partners, was a JV of Plenary, Glideways, and Flatiron. And it's a $450 million P3 where we're constructing a 28-mile dedicated pathway closed AV network in Eastern Contra Costa County. And that was done through P3. We went through had five teams, and through a number of one-on-one industry review and market meetings, it got down to 2 proposals, and we ended up selecting the Glideways team. So we've got a lot of experience in terms of like how to actually procure technology and also fund it. Both from public dollars, local dollars, federal dollars, local dollars, and even leveraging private equity.
Okay, good. It's a great example to follow for other authorities, I'm sure. Okay, I think we have a good baseline now to move on and look a bit forward in the future. And the way I like to put it is to imagine ourselves, put ourselves in shoes of a city, whatever city, and I think it was nicely pictured by Julia in her presentation, that there is no city that is the same, that is truly the same in terms of its inhabitants, or how the streets are made, the climate, etc., etc. So select a city and imagine you could have 10,000 AVs. What would you do with that? What would you do with this technology? On which type of vehicles would you like to see this technology being applied? For which type of services, serving which community? It goes a bit, so it's a bit of a surprise. It was not really in my preparation of the panel, but it was going to this, your expectation with this technology, and I like to put it concrete with figures and having really massive possible deployments available. And if money was not directly an issue of, you have this 10,000 AVs, what would you do? Sven, I see you smiling already.
I'm smiling, yeah, because you're emphasizing a question that was not prepared. And if I understood you correctly, you want numbers and want us to quantify it. But let's dive right into it. Let's see what we can do. So I think it's a very important question. To flip this around and not just say, this is what we need, but really let's assume it's there, and what do we do with
exactly.
it? So this is really good. And what you basically implied already in your question, I think, is the piece that says every city is different. And what Julia showed us, like contrasting or comparing a couple of cities, you see already the differences, and it's even more when you go out of the fair weather belt in this country, and maybe even more if you go to other countries. And so this is really where we need to, at this point I might advertise maybe my strategy class at Stanford, where we might need to take a strategic approach. So what are the needs, what are the solutions, and how can we match those? And at that point, weather certainly plays a role. But how well is the public transportation system developed? Is this a feeder system that we are envisioning for public transportation, which was pointed out already? Or is it something where there's a more or less desert of public transportation, so that it's just leapfrogging what's happening in other places? But if you tell me I get 10,000, you say 10,000 automated vehicles for, I assume, like a decently sized city of couple of million inhabitants, I would really want to make sure that at the outset you really have not just a partnership, but a strong role of the public sector that also takes an approach. No, we don't want like 10,000 robo-taxis just like that. So let's
On
say,
top, you mean on top of everything? Or like, how do you mean not just like...
well, that's another question. What are we going to do with the existing vehicles? But just about these 10,000 vehicles, I would say, okay, there's some for like individual transportation, like a ride-hailing replacement or competitor, if you will. But then goods delivery, like what we heard, which is really important, like for medical purposes. And I would also look at what is it like for the public utility that a city provides. Well, what is it something, whether that's cleaning of the streets, whether that's like trash collection or something like this. So I would really recommend a strategic approach based on the needs of that particular city, and then the public sector saying, this is what we need. And if we get 10,000 vehicles, it's maybe then 2,000 for this and 4,000 for that. That's, I think, as good as my answer gets.
No, it's...
otherwise, we would need to look at a particular city and what they need.
Of course, no, I really like how you mentioned the logistics that we haven't mentioned so much so far. And also, like, this trash collection and other services that tend to be like less under the spotlight, but actually a lot of activities are going there from the AV provider.
If I can add just one quick thing. So what drives my thinking in what I just described is that, to my knowledge, there are not many, if any at all, public transportation companies in the world that are profitable. So now the thinking is, great, we're not paying for a driver. Sorry, drivers, you need to find other jobs. And then the business model supposedly works out much better. But it's not that simple. So we need to understand that here's something that a community that a city offers to its citizens. And hopefully with automated vehicles, it can offer that better than before, because the bus service is not always as good as it should be and as nice as it is in San Francisco. I would say the tram and the subway is not as good as in other cities, for instance, in New York, as you mentioned. So to offer something, and you cannot expect automatically that it's going to be a great business. It has to be a good offer, a good service to the citizens.
Since you were asking for some numbers, just two off of what Sven was saying, more than half of all transit trips in the US occur in the New York metro region. So New York, in an American context, is truly an exception. In the academic setting, anyone who's doing like transit planning research always needs to exclude New York because it will throw off your numbers. This gets to the point of you need to consider these cities separately. To Sven's point, transit agencies not being profitable, you are right. There are a small handful that are profitable, mostly in the developed world. The developing world is its own category. In the developed world, the ones that are nominally profitable, there are some in China and in Korea. And the reason they're profitable is they don't make any money selling rides. They make money by owning the land and basically being development corporations. But that gets to my point that I wanted to, just to follow up, not disagreeing with Sven at all here. I think to find the viable deployment pathways, we need to actually find who's going to benefit. What I said before, the reason I love transportation, that if we do it right, everyone benefits for a century. That sounds wonderful. It turns out that's a pretty horrible business model, and it's also a pretty horrible way to get elected. No one really cares about your grandchildren benefiting in the current context. You need to find people and groups who are invested in what improvements automated vehicles can actually provide. And one of the first questions I ask whenever we're talking about business models, use cases, et cetera, is what are you proposing here with automated vehicles that you couldn't do with a manually driven vehicle? Why does it need to be a self-driving bus? Can't it just be a regular bus? And it always amazes me how many business models fall apart by not being able to answer that question. And we have some that do, like what we were talking about before, selling L2 vehicles. Pretty clear what the business model is. By definition, they are not manually driven or not manually driven to the same extent. People want to buy it, companies want to sell it. You know, it's just, you know, micro-econ 101. It's pretty straightforward, but it's harder to find the other solutions there, and I think that's what cities need to be focusing on. And it's not just technical, it's also political. are you going to be running into major entrenched powers, like with respect to the curb space argument that the previous panel was discussing, that kind of like the curb the way that it is, and don't want to have to start paying for parking in front of their $20 million brownstone in Greenwich Village. That's why we have free parking in Greenwich Village. So when you're thinking about what are the solutions I'm most interested, especially from the city's perspective, what are the real opportunities? What can you offer that's going to make people's lives noticeably better? And it needs to be an argument other than we're just saving money on labor costs. It's a new technology. And I hate to say this, Uber drivers are not very well paid. And it's trying to, replace a very cheap Uber driver with a very expensive taxi. This is a difficult proposition. So we were talking before in the green room. Pam, I'm so sorry if I got your name wrong. Sharon, I knew Pilot's mom, Sharon, I'm so sorry. But you came up with a great example where you were saying, and please forgive me if I'm paraphrasing too much, I love being able to take a Waymo because Uber and Lyft drivers will cancel on me on a regular basis. And it is apps because they won't accept, and it's illegal, but they won't accept my seeing eye dog. And that's totally unfair, but that doesn't negate the problem that you can't get a regular Uber or Lyft with any sort of reliability. So for you, it offers a really clear benefit. And I think we need to be looking out for those and getting the cities more involved in what are the actual mechanisms where we can be providing real benefits with automation that you can't just hand wave away by saying we're saving on driver labor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, before moving to you, Tim, I can see you mentioned the labor cost, and I've heard that a lot because I've been in close collaboration with public transit all the time. But the point is, first, there is a driver shortage that many cities in Northern Europe, we have it definitely. And the idea also is like, I think for a bus of fleet, something like if you have 300 buses running, 40% of your cost of operation is labor cost. So there is it's legitimate to want to optimize this cost. And after the money you can save, so to say, can be used on running other services. I mean, it's not about...
But this is a very important point. Driverless vehicles are not laborless vehicles. You are shifting the labor to different directions. But I'm just automatically now.
A longer future, it will not be one-to-one anymore.
I don't care about the longer future. It doesn't matter because we're talking about in 20 years it'll be cheaper. You need to have a viable deployment pathway where you can be delivering benefits every step of the way. I'm sorry if I'm getting animated, but right now we have a lot of government funding that is supporting this. But like Tim, what is the future? What happens when the government funds run out? What do you see? It's a legitimate question. This
is a whole other new question.
That's a whole other. But how is this can this be a standalone? What would they look like? What would any of your pilots look like as standalone services? Even assuming that they need to be subsidized, just like transit is.
Yeah. So that is the real thing I think that we're trying to tackle. Right now with a lot of our projects is what is the business plan? Right? I think as you start, for example, the Glideways project, it's a P3 project. So they're intending to, make money off of that project, And so, and we all believe walking into this project that it's going to require some public subsidy, walking into the project. And so again, it gets back to focusing on the public benefit. So if there's going to be a public subsidy, there's got to be a public benefit. And I think that what we're really focused on is how do we make sure this technology, in some ways doesn't compete with public transit, and I think that's what we're really focused on with this project is and so what we need to do is, the Glideways system, the fares will probably be somewhat competitive to public transportation, both because these are equity priority communities, and we want to make sure this technology is available to everyone, but also because we don't want to cannibalize our existing public transportation system, and so we know that there's probably going to be a public subsidy. We know we're going to be working with our technology provider on providing that subsidy. And there's a lot of other use cases, that we're looking at on that same token. But I think, getting back to your 10,000 vehicle question, it would be literally my dream come true. I'd be so excited. So if anyone has 10,000 autonomous vehicles, please come talk to me. Happy to open for business in Contra Costa County. And so I think what we would, one of the first things I would look at is probably parking right off the bat. And I think looking at how minimum parking requirements and thinking about how to really reconfigure parking in streets and really deploy this technology in a smart way, I think that would be something I would look at immediately. Really thinking about how this technology can really address, again, the gaps in land use and transportation is really what I would be looking at, completely looking at. And I think that, these 10,000 vehicles, when we can take this technology out to the public, and when you can tell someone that they, rather than them driving to the BART station, I don't know about most communities, most cities, over 50% of the trips are less than 2 miles, right? And so if you can take this technology and hopefully, reduce a lot of those trips by using, shared trips, using a shared autonomous vehicles and carpool and Uber pool type of programs, I think that you could really reduce, traffic and congestion and really hopefully provide a public benefit. And I think that, so really kind of addressing in that way of focusing on that first and last mile for us is like really, really key. And then I've already mentioned some of the other use cases, but again, making sure, and you mentioned already, Sivan, like these transit deserts, people who do not have access to transportation at all, in my mind, is really important. Now, the hard part about that, is the business case. We all know why Waymo's in San Francisco. It's an extremely hard ODD, but we know why they're here because it has the top grossing TNC market in the country. And so that's one of the reasons why they're here. They're after that market, and so I think that doing that same market out in suburban land, may not really work out there, and so again, that's where, how does the government come in and really maybe potentially provide those subsidies to get those use cases to work in maybe such a location that may not compete as well as downtown San Francisco.
Mm-hmm. We have 5 minutes left, and we will have to conclude. You want to say something very quickly?
Very, very quickly. So what Tim is saying there, especially with the land use, that's where I was trying to get to. If you're talking about, we can save on parking. Oh, well, that's a real clear, unique benefit that you can be having. And that's something that people could say, for example, if you've been to downtown Walnut Creek, it's lovely, it's walkable, it's very cute. Being able to provide more people with access to a place like that is an objective benefit, and it's one that if you can say create a nice little mobility hub, provide first mile, last mile shuttles, that is something that you're doing with automation that simply wouldn't be easy to do via any other way. That is a potentially unique benefit to automation. And so that's why I'm also personally, as Tim and I have talked about a lot, really excited about the land use.
Yeah, one thing that we're currently contemplating in Contra Costa County is essentially, so we're doing what's called an integrated transit plan. And we basically have essentially re-envisioned transit in Contra Costa County. And we said, okay, this is where buses are going to go, right? This is where we're going to dedicate buses. And then now, how do we complement buses with this emerging technology, both from first and last mile shuttles, but also from everything from urban air mobility, advanced air mobility, first and last mile shuttles. All of this technology that's coming down the pipeline, how do we use it to really serve that public transportation system and think about what that business model actually looks like? So in some ways, what we're thinking about doing is building a network of shared mobility hubs, about 100 shared mobility hubs across the entire county, that hopefully someday you'll be able to walk or bike, to a shared mobility hub and have access to personalized mobility options that are both autonomous in getting to you that first and last mile to the BART station, et cetera, or downtown Walnut Creek. And so that network, and this is really interesting to kind of think about, could be monetized as you kind of start thinking about the future? And then how can monetizing those assets, such as shared mobility hubs, support the ongoing operations of that P3? So those are the types of business cases and models that we're looking at in Contra Costa County.
Great. If you're okay, from both of your side, I will take this as your conclusion. And it matched very much the question that was asked by some of you, asking about how to make how automation can make transit more efficient and attractive. I think Tim, your answer was exactly in this direction, and so we answered it. And the other question was about having like comparison with Europe and US on how AVs could be integrated to transit. I think we covered it also mostly. Sven, I would like to, maybe you want to say something as a conclusion regarding also what we discussed all there. It's also about how to make impact. How can we make a positive impact through the AVs? And I would take this as your concluding words. And so
okay,
that
sure.
we can
Happy to. And in conclusion, maybe to say what I like to emphasize with automated vehicles, it's not just about the vehicle. We are not just building automobile 2.0. We are really re-envisioning the transportation system. And this is why this is a much larger undertaking than in other evolutionary steps that we've seen in the automotive world. And we really need to think as much about the automobile as we need to think about traffic. And that, I think, is missing sometimes a little bit in the discussion. I think it was very present in this discussion here, which I really appreciate. But the individual companies, in my view, that are pushing for this technology still have a pretty strong focus on the automobile. And I hope there will be more on the traffic, which does include public transportation, but also, like me, a biker, a cyclist on the road.
Thank you. James, Tim, you're good? You want to last
I have
words?
one thing to say. Go for it, James.
No, you go.
You go. Yeah.
I'm good.
Okay. So one thing that we haven't talked about that I think is really important to kind of just say is really the labor component of this whole conversation. So as I'm sure if you're all experts, I'm sure, in the AV field, but last year AB 316 was vetoed. That was a driver-in bill. Now you got AB 2286, you got AB 1777, you got SB 915, all happening in California, which a lot of them have their own issues. And so all driven by labor, by the way. And so if we do not address this with labor, it is going to continue to slow down scalable deployment in California and across the country. And so if you're interested in learning more, I actually lead a coalition. It's called Automated Connected Electric Shared Mobility Coalition. It's a national coalition that's really addressing this workforce development issue. And we literally had a meeting at one of our board meetings in DC about a month ago with the head of TDT, which is all the transportation trade associations. And then also in California, something we're doing at Gomentum Station I think is really unique is we're starting to develop our own workforce development programs. And we're striving to develop what we're calling the California Innovation Alliance, which is really hoping to be the group that the governor said he wanted to create in AB 316, which is to address workforce development. And so we're working really closely with Mineta and the universities, but also working closely with CalSTA, the California Workforce Development Board, our Contra Costa Workforce Development Board, both private sector, public sector. And we're really trying to basically create the table of bringing labor, to the conversation. I don't know how many people went to AV America a few weeks ago and at the airport there, but ATU, AFL, they were there in full force. They are paying attention.
Oh, yeah.
And I introduced myself to one of the guys in the front row, and he just happened to be the director of collective bargaining for ATU. And he actually thanked me for introducing myself to him because he's like, no one is talking to us. And so this is what we need to do as an industry is we can't be afraid to talk to labor. We got to bring them to the table because if we don't, it's going to continue to hinder scalable deployment. Mm-hmm. So that's
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very quick, James. We are running out of time.
No, I think Tim covered it perfectly. I would say we've actually dealt with that one issue, just to finish up, that we hadn't talked about too much. We've been talking about mostly moving people. I think, and I'm not the only one, that some of the best early applications for automated vehicle technology are going to be on the freight side. There's a clearer benefit, there's a clearer pathway, smaller things like 2% improvement, more reliability, et cetera, may not matter on a one-on-one basis when I'm booking a ride, but are hugely beneficial to the Amazons and the Walmarts of the world. However, in that situation, labor becomes even more important than it was before. We have started to do some work with them, and pretty much that's always the first question is what does labor feel? And honestly, it is guiding our research more than almost anything else, because, for example, like we've been talking about doing some interesting drayage work at ports, so that really good application for automated trucks, relatively small area, easy, and that's become in certain places a pretty hard no or not an ideal first place because, the ports do not want to mention automation to their drayage drivers because that will create a work stoppage and it's just a non-starter.
Yeah, our project for the county hospital, we are actually, May Mobility is providing the technology, but County Connection, our bus driver, is providing the drivers, and we're actually training the bus drivers to be safety attendants for May Mobility.
That's great.
Yeah, and they're ATU bus drivers.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks for all sharing all this insight. I'm very sorry for the abrupt end. We really need to move on with the program. We are still have some very nice talks coming. So thanks again, and let's move on with the program. And everybody stay around, and we can have more indirect talk together. Thank you.
All right. So actually thought we could have continued for another 30 minutes on that, Tim, so thank you very much. And I think, Henriette didn't say this, but some of the European deployments are already experimenting with moving boxes and people. So I think it's a really, really important topic. Without further ado, I just want to roll right in and introduce our next guest, who's, I told to dress down because I was like, it's Friday in San Francisco, and then I got up this morning and dressed like I was going to a funeral. So you're going to take off your jacket, Ron, and I'm going to loosen my tie.
Am I turned on yet? I don't think am I turned on?
I don't know. Are you turned on?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. All right, so we make this a little, it's Friday afternoon. So welcome, Ron Thaniel from Zoox. Let's give him a hand. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Well, first of all, I'm a DC guy, and so being casual is not having a tie. So, that was my hardest decision I had to make this morning. I got up, my team was telling me business casual. And I said, well, what is business casual in the Bay? And so I actually just did the DC thing, got rid of the tie.
Yeah.
All right,
I'm violating my own no tie policy, so don't worry.
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. And thank you so much for inviting me here and the opportunity to share with you folks for 30 minutes a little bit of the Zoox journey. It is such an exciting journey. My background, to get this conversation going, and I can roll up the sleeve.
Oh yeah, we can. Yeah,
there we go. Is I have had the most rewarding career of advising mayors and cities across the country, as well as governors with big cities. I was with the U.S. Conference of Mayors in Washington. For many years, I was the executive director of NACTO, National Association of City Transportation Officials. I advised the governor of New York on the largest investment at the time of transit investment. And then most recently, I was a political appointment in the White House to the U.S. Department of Transportation. And the theme through all those positions, though, was a focus on transportation and mobility in cities and how the right policies, the investments, and the right projects can lead to more livable, sustainable, vibrant communities for everyone. And so that's how I got here to Zoox, because when I thought about it, I left a pro-city administration in Washington to a pro-city autonomous vehicle company. That's exactly what we're doing here at Zoox. Going back to 2014, we've had a laser mission. A couple key points when I think about Zoox, and I was going to continue this until we stop the video. We see cities as incredible, exciting places that bring people together. We also see the backbone of cities as being transit. I think we would all agree with that, right? Transit? Yes? Yeah. There we go. All right. So when we think of Zoox, we see our robotaxi, which is designed for cities, You didn't see the door opening, but it slides, not out, so it protects pedestrians and cyclists. It's bi-directional. You don't have that dangerous three-point turn, for example. It's all electric as well. Battery can operate up to 16 hours per charge. It is designed for cities. And the way I look at it, at one point in the day, you're going to get on a bus, you're going to get on the subway, or here it's the BART, or Muni. You're going to get on a bike, and you're going to ride the Zoox vehicle. This is about urban mobility. What you don't have in that is a personal automobile. And so that's the goal here. Now, you may have your car at home, but our goal is to make it less likely that you will need that car in cities. So that's really, in a nutshell, what we're doing.
Boom, drop the mic. So you have an office here in the Bay Area. You have a vehicle, but maybe you can tell us a little more about. I had the chance to ride in the vehicle. Lucky me, got a chance to ride in the vehicle last week. It is that cool. And also just some of the design attributes in terms of interiors are really well done, really well lit. You have an operational design domain here in the Bay Area, I believe, as well as in another ODD in Nevada. What's the vehicle look like? What's the kind of the special sauce on the vehicle? And I could say it myself, but no.
Well, I was going to ask you, what did you think? And it sounded like it was good, but go ahead, tell us all.
Okay, so you said a couple of the other speakers were saying, Sven Viker, you said you're pretty blown away when you got in the Waymo. I've been in the Waymo. I've been in the Cruise. You're doing a great job on the driving side. I was really impressed by the vehicle. It's a really well thoughtful vehicle. For those of you that know how the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration works, NHTSA, you have to get type approval for the vehicle. My understanding is you're fully type approved for your vehicle?
Well, in the U.S., you don't have type approval.
Right.
It's self-certification.
Okay, so you self-certified your vehicle. Yeah, sorry.
Self-certification. Yeah.
So you're self-certified, but it's very interesting, like the way that you've gotten this bi-directional vehicle, where the vehicle can pull into a parking space, flip open the...
Should we just talk about the vehicle? Yeah, let's talk about the vehicle.
Yeah.
Number one, it is, I like to start like this. It is designed for cities. It fits the size of what you would want to commute in a city. It is bi-directional. So again, to get rid of those three-point dangerous turns, I'm NHTSA, and we always focus.
So bi-directional means it can pull into a parking space.
Pull in, lights, switch, pull out.
Yeah.
So you never have to worry about making that turn.
And my understanding too, you can articulate the wheels.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and four-wheel steering as well as. Let's talk about the inside of the vehicle.
Okay.
It is. We say it's built for the rider, not the driver. So you're sitting in a campfire position, seating, or stagecoach seating as well. You can look at it like that. You're having the conversation. You're getting to know the rider with you in the vehicle. You're not driving. You're not driving. You don't have that task of driving. What you will also not see is a steering wheel. You won't see a steering wheel moving. Our vehicle was ground up, purpose built. So you were getting to a really important point here. Our vehicle, from day one, we had a vision and a mission, because we truly believe in order to reach the safety potential that we all know AVs can deliver. Remember, it doesn't drive distracted, it doesn't drive impaired, it doesn't drive tired, all those facts that NHTSA talks about, tied in with the 42,000 lives lost every year on our road. The vehicle itself is designed for the safety experience. So when I say that, you have the experience, but we prioritize safety. It has over 100 safety innovations that you will not find in a traditional car today. It far exceeds federal standards for motor vehicles at this point. And so one that we are super proud of is the horseshoe airbag. Perhaps you can go to our website and see it, but there's an airbag that comes down and will protect all four riders of the vehicle. As you know, in a traditional car, the airbag system is largely designed to protect the driver. So from our standpoint, every person in that vehicle will have that protection of the airbag. This is one of our more than 100 safety innovations.
And there's a submarine. So it comes down from the top, comes down from the bottom, and also back of the head, right?
Yeah. Another point I like to speak to is where we have our LiDAR, radar, camera-based technology. The components of the vehicle are on the corners of the vehicle, not on the top. And we believe that gives far greater visibility, 360 degrees in all directions, 150 meters out. And so we can see what's happening around us in the vehicle. But can I talk about why we're doing this?
Sure.
Okay, yeah. So at Zoox, we have two primary insights. And this goes to the very beginning of the company. Number one, we firmly believe that the model of individual human-driven vehicles is broken. That's broken. You look at the issues that we're dealing with congestion, sprawl, public health impacts, climate impacts. I can go even further if you want.
No, that's enough.
No, but I can go down the list. I mean, we have a laundry list of concerns. Also, if you think about this, your car, the average car, sits 96% of the time parked. Doesn't move. Now, I like to say, and this is what I do on a regular basis, would you buy an investment that only performs well 4% of the time? I think the answer is no. And so that's a key part of the way we look at this. The last piece, and then I want to keep going into this conversation, is about transportation technology. And so we truly believe in order to meet the safety potential of an autonomous vehicle, you have to have a ground-up purpose-built vehicle. And when you look at the hardware and the software platforms of our vehicle, it is designed mobility as a service purpose, and it also provides that experience that people are looking for.
So maybe let's get. Ever since I usually took the reins like 5-6 years ago, I have been wanting to have Zoox here. We've really spent a lot of time, so I'm so thrilled to have this conversation. But what's the pathway for your services? What can we expect from Zoox? Mm-hmm. You know, for me, it's felt like quiet. I work in this space. I've been working in this space since 2014, 2015, and I want to know what's going on. What can we expect?
We're old guys in this space. You know that? Gosh. It's interesting. So I work
young at heart.
Young at heart, yeah. But I got my career started back in 2015 in this space, working for the governor of New York. And that was the time where the companies wanted to test in New York City. Remember that? And so it was so new. I remember sitting down with the governor. I said, Governor, we want to talk to you about an autonomous vehicle. He said, what is that? We said, well, it's self-driving. He said, why would anyone not want to drive a car? Yeah, but then he saw it, and he saw the potential opportunities with this technology. So it's been around a while. So we are old guys in this space, but young at heart, I like that. At Zoox, here's where we look at this. I'm going to share some news with you today. Our first market to provide rides to the public will be later this year in Las Vegas. And that's really exciting. First time anywhere, and when I say anywhere, I mean anywhere, that there will be a ground-up purpose-built robo-taxi providing service for the public. And that's right in Las Vegas, an incredibly dynamic city, 40 million visitors every year. So that's our first.
And that vehicle is being manufactured in Fremont?
It's right here in Fremont.
Yeah, so homegrown here in the Bay Area.
Made in the U.S. We are proud to do that. Yeah. We expect to always do that. Yeah. We are a proud California company as well. So yeah, but Vegas is our first market. It's really exciting. If you go to Vegas right now, you will see that vehicle operating in traffic, congestion, 45 miles an hour. It's an incredible experience. Incredible experience. So that's the market. Now, I do want to talk about, because the next question is, well, where are you going next? That's always a question I get.
Apparently Tim Hill.
Were you going to ask that question?
Sorry, Tim. Get in line.
So I figured that would be the next question. Well, what's next?
Yeah.
So I always like to say this is not a race. Now, I was working the Hill Congress. We call it the Hill in D.C. Back in 2017, there were a lot more companies, number one. And there was an effort at that point to get a federal law in place. And I remember companies, not Zoox, but companies saying, oh, by 2020, AVs will be everywhere. There was so much hype. Well, it's not the case. And that's because this is difficult, requires patience, and it requires a foundational focus on safety. And that's important. If you approach this as being in a race, there's a very good chance you're not focused on safety at the same time. So The way we do this, we like to sit back and say, number one, we have a retrofitted Toyota fleet that does mapping before we put the robotaxi on the road. And that's the first stage. But I'll skip some of those details. When we enter a market, we say what is known as tiny, small, medium, large. So no city's going to wake up tomorrow and have 100 robotaxis on the road. That's just not our approach. We start tiny. That means identifying the community, mapping, testing, but even more than that, building the relationships with the community, building the relationships with the city leaders as well. And so that is a measured approach. It's an approach that I believe at the end of the day, you will see results. The public accepting the technology, city leaders understanding the technology, first responders feeling comfortable with the technology. That's another important fact. We prioritize engagement with first responders at Zoox. And a great example, I see Phil Pierce over there somewhere. Where's Phil? Where's Phil? Raise your hand, Phil.
Hey, Phil.
There you are, over there. I can't see you. So Phil is a former SFMTA government affairs staffer. Are you telling me we have to end up?
No.
Okay, good.
Keep rolling.
Okay, I thought we were going to have to wrap this up.
We're patting Phil's back.
So one thing that Phil does, and I'm super proud of his work at the same time, is he engages with first responders. That's a priority for Zoox. And so just recently, a couple months back, we have over 250 first responders right here in San Francisco. We want first responders to know our vehicle inside and out. We want them to be comfortable with it. We learn a lot from them. For example, we have two-way communications, and that was the suggestion that they made. We want them to be able to communicate if there is ever, this is a wild world out here, so we want them to be able to communicate with us if there's ever an issue. They suggested we needed a phone number on the vehicle.
Yeah.
Guess what? There's a phone number on the vehicle. They said, we want to know what's happening, so we have messages that come out from the vehicle for first responders to know exactly what's happening. So, it's going to be, we're not in a race. We're taking our time.
It's a good flow. And I think, just to kind of open the aperture, and I think, all three of the companies, including Zoox and Waymo and Cruise that we've worked with, and some of whom are sponsors of this event, really have really tried to kind of take this build-up approach. But I definitely have seen you kind of deliberately emphasize this word tiny or baby steps, which is, I think, is very good, but it also kind of recognizes that there is an inherent tension to the technology tendency to build the plane while you're flying it, which is an inherent risk when you're designing a complex system like a vehicle. Right. So I think if we were thinking about this, how do you start tiny when you have a product that we had a gentleman here, Tim Hale, on the stage that he'd take 10,000 of them tomorrow, as would my friend Andre for Ruther, who wants hundreds of thousands of vehicles, I believe. So how do you kind of meet that market going forward?
Well, number one, it's super exciting to hear such requests. They want our vehicle. Safety is foundational. I'm going to go back to that. Safety is foundational. So, we focus on safety, and when we're ready, based on a number of factors, our safety case, then we will continue to grow. We will look at new markets. But at the end of the day, no matter what the demand is, safety is foundational. And so that's the way we look at it. Plus, the other thing is, I see Cheyenne over there. I'm going to give Cheyenne a shout out as well. She oversees all of our public affairs within Zoox. You can't just put something on the road without engagement with city leaders. And so that also takes time. Phil does it as well. We meet with the mayor's office. We meet with Julia, SFMTA. We meet with Tilly at SFCTA. The board of supervisors, the community groups. So if you're going to start just throwing those vehicles out there, you're not doing your homework at the end of the day. Yeah. And that's a key part of this.
So maybe let's ask a different question. There's a lot of desire to see more automated vehicles integrated with public transit. Mm-hmm. You're making sure you have a purpose-built and safe vehicle to ultimately meet that demand. But in the meantime, what can all the cities that are out there do to be prepared for you? What actions can they take today to really kind of, whether it's your service or if it's May Mobility or a combination, a company we haven't even heard of before, what are the things that cities should be doing?
Have a plan. It's simple as that. Have a plan. I go back to my time, I was also with the city of Minneapolis early in my career. I did transportation public works. And the Twin Cities they have a reputation of planning paralysis. That's what we used to say. But from a point of view of autonomous vehicle, it's always good to enter a market when a city has a plan. The city knows what it's going to do with this technology. Mm-hmm. Because then that helps us. And it's better to have a plan ready as opposed to reacting to the technology. And so we also want to be a resource. We have a lot of expertise in the company. We work with cities and states across the country. We work with the federal government. As a city begins to plan what that future looks like, less parking, for example, that's a big one. Get rid of all those parking spaces, add parks and housing. All cities need that. I can guarantee you affordable housing is a big deal. So have that plan in place. That's important. The other point I do want to mention, because I'm a huge fan of NACTO, I'm going to give a NACTO shout out here. You have some of the best minds in urban planning within that company, within that association. Work with cities across the country. Develop policies so that when we go to city B tomorrow, we know that it's similar to city A. Now, every city is different. I get that. New York's different from San Francisco. But there are common policies, I think. I don't want to say rules of the road because that gets into traffic laws, and I don't want to go down that path. Like, I've never get New York City said, there's a difference between Manhattan, New York, and Manhattan, Kansas. And so I get that. So I'm not going to say rules of the road. But have a common set of policies for what you expect from autonomous vehicles, to companies. That's also important. So use the national groups to do that. Yeah.
And that's good too, because you mentioned not just a plan, but embedding that in policy. A couple years ago, we had some work where we surveyed top 600 cities in the country, and we found that a lot of them would mention automated vehicles, but very rarely would they embed it in local code. Would they embed it in the equivalent of their general plan, and also have a specific strategic document on it. So there was very little of that, and just like a lot of this notional mention. So I like that you're saying have a strategic plan or have a plan, but also have some granular policy. And some of that is kind of simple stuff. I think what we talked about earlier, and Jerry Tierney's somewhere in the room and wrote this question about like, hey, deal with your parking now. If you deal with parking, that helps us with our pickup and drop off environment.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so we have some questions from the audience. A couple minutes left. Short conversation, because you have big things to do. I think you're trying, So a couple minutes with you, but I think one of the things that we've heard time and time again is, and we anchored in our last session, really focusing on handicap accessibility, AD accessibility. We had a special feature on that last fall. We heard from Sharon earlier. What can we envision from the Zoox vehicle in terms of meeting needs of people that may be low-sighted, not sighted, but also in a wheelchair?
Yeah, well, I can tell you this. When I think about the opportunities around autonomous vehicles for people with disabilities, it just opens up a whole universe. Yeah. And so that's been one of the key opportunities with this technology. But when I think about our vehicle in particular, this is a first generation vehicle. This is the first vehicle. When we enter a market with this vehicle, we will partner with a provider to ensure a very high quality service. But we will have a future generation vehicle that will be wheelchair accessible. And that's an important point within the company. This is the first one. Do you want to get that?
That's okay.
But we will partner with a provider to make sure that you have high quality service. But in the meantime, I guarantee you our future vehicle will also be wheelchair accessible.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, I hope you get that vehicle. I also hope, I hope Cruise, I know some folks from Cruise are in the audience. I hope we get the Origin someday as well.
Oh, we're the Cruise
Yeah,
folks.
Well,
Come on,
we don't have to single them out. But maybe there's one more kind of question that I really want to focus on here, because
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
We are all on a journey. And whether it's Cruise or Waymo or Zoox, we're on a journey. We call these guys our fellow travelers, because I think we're all working towards an autonomous future that will make mobility safer in this country.
I think that's well put. It's well put. It's a universe that is inclusive, and I think we've seen from both private sector companies as well as public sector companies today. an interest, as well as from kind of nonprofits, an interest in kind of seeing this future go forward. One of the things that was emphasized in the last panel, but also, and I think was really emphasized by Dr. Cornet, was this idea of shared. And I think this goes to a question, but what is Cruise doing to make sure that we have, that we can move towards this shared vehicle? Or sorry, I mean Zoox.
Okay.
Sorry, I mean like. Sorry, apologies.
Okay.
What are you doing to actually move to make sure that we can really try to think of these as shared vehicles? Is there a strategy for that?
I guess it's in our NDA. It's who we are. Did I say NDA? Yeah, but anyhow.
It's just DNA.
DNA,
We're
yeah.
both. It's late. It's late.
DNA,
You took off your jacket.
DNA. It's in our DNA from day one. No, it really is. This is important. So when you look at our vehicle, there was never any confusion at Zoox. We knew that we wanted a vehicle designed for shared mobility in cities. Simple as that. We never plan on putting the public in our retrofitted Toyota test fleet. The public would ride in our shared vehicle. And it's designed for mobility as a service, mobility on demand. And again, when I think about cities, I will be careful. This is Ron's view, Cheyenne. I want to say that out loud. For too many years, the individual human-driven vehicle has really made quality of life more difficult in cities. And when I say that, we've already talked about the issues of climate change, sustainability, issues of equity as well, affordability, public health.
Beautification, yeah.
Beautification. I would argue in the 20th century, you had policies that led to disinvestment in cities on transportation. You did. So when I think about what we're doing here at Zoox, we are helping cities reimagine what the possibilities are. And that starts with our shared mobility, our robotaxi, and how that vehicle complements urban mobility, urban living. And so at the end of the day, as I said, there's a reason I'm here. My entire career, I grew up in Baltimore. And so growing up in Baltimore, if you didn't either have a car on the transit line, you were out of luck. And so I have, throughout my entire career, I've had a laser focus on ensuring that people that live in cities have better opportunities through transportation access. And I'm at Zoox because we believe in that. That is important with what we're doing. And so that's why we have this shared mobility.
Yeah, and I think that really aligns well with them. I thank Julia for that graph with the American Community Survey slide on there, because you really have, while we can try our best to serve that 28% of people that are, let's just say, under-resourced in terms of a car, and again, terrible way to ask a question, agree with you, Julia, but there's, how do we better serve them in this new innovative transit future we have? And I think that's, I get that sense from you. That's your personal mission, and it sounds like you wouldn't be at Zoox if that wasn't in kind of the company's, not NDA, DNA.
I know DNA.
But we're all NDA'd. We're out of time. We're probably a little over time. I really appreciate you being here.
Lovely talking, yes.
Michael Goldman, I'm an associate dean here at the University of San Francisco. Thank you for spending the day and the afternoon with us. Another round of applause for our speakers today, especially Billy and Henriette. I think they facilitated a fabulous day. I think one of the things that struck me about today was the numbers. And I saw a number of you writing down copious notes about the numbers you heard today. Tim Hale mentioned, right, in the previous panel from CCTA, which is around the corner from where I live, 40% of Contra Costa, I think, if I recall, residents can't get to healthcare. 40% in 2024. That's kind of scary, right? And so for the University of San Francisco, that 166 years ago was founded just around the corner on a cow path that became Market Street, if you think about mobility. For 166 years, we've been thinking about this question of justice and inclusivity and addressing discrimination and the ways in which transit works for everyone. And that 40% number for me was very shocking because it's around the corner from where I live. So I hope for you this afternoon that these numbers mean more than just a bit of a content download. There was a lot of great content up here, but I hope you also took, besides the numbers, I hope you also took a whole bunch of action items. So I hope you've created some fabulous connections. I know you've taken those great notes and underlined it 3 times. Good luck with the action steps for Monday morning, or perhaps tonight. I've learned a lot. Billy said to me this afternoon when I arrived, just sit in the corner and learn. And I've learned a hell of a lot. I hope you have as well. This is part of what the University of San Francisco is all about, wherever we may do our events and activities. So thank you for spending the afternoon with us. I'm going to hand back to Billy for some final closing thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Well, I thank you so much. I really appreciate you all being here. Stay a friend of us, stay a friend of the university. We do a lot of these things, both in the College of Arts and Sciences, in the College of Management. We've got great degree programs. You want to look at them, or we welcome you into this conversation. I want to take a minute and just we don't do this without great sponsors. Particularly, thank you, Waymo and Cruise. You really have made this event possible. But California Path, your support is invaluable. Invest Bavaria, I know James Mister is here. Thank you for your support. We actually have some European sponsors, so those of you that are watching Europe, thank you. MapTM, S-Based Mobilities, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Xavier. And we've got an ongoing partnership with Atmos. Thank you, Ravi and Pete from Atmos, for establishing a bank that does climate-positive banking. That's all we have for today. Thank you so much again. Stay tuned for next year. We'll do this again. We love you, Commonwealth Club. Thanks to all the staff. Thanks to Henriette Cornet for being here. Thanks to my students, Aaron, Dan, and Nathan. Thank you so much for being here and helping. Stephen Griswold, thank you for taking a day off work to be here. Stephen works with CCTA with Tim. So thank you very much. We'll see you again next year. Thank you, Ron.
Great, thank
you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.